doing some of the functional lab testing, being able to collect information to understand what's going on in my body, I was able to take strategic action again to clear those things out of my body, rebalance my hormones. And I was able to actually put my autoimmune condition in remission within 6 months and stay there. So I hope by sharing this story, one, it's an inspiration to everybody that it is possible to reclaim your health. And what really helps with that is collecting information and being able to utilize as much that information to see the full picture and be able to take personalized, targeted, strategic action for what your body specifically needs to overcome those things.
Good morning and welcome to the Fusionary Health Podcast. I'm Dr. Shivani Gupta, and this is the podcast dedicating to recalibrating your health every day. My goal is to help you wake up each day energized by addressing root causes and giving you new approaches to preventive health. The more we know about integrative health, the more empowered we are in building the vibrant health we want. Welcome to the Fusionary Health Podcast. I have an incredible guest with me here today, Jenn Malecha, and I'm so excited to have this topic that we're going to dive into. She is an FDN health coach. She has been a personal trainer. She has her own practice where she works directly with clients on helping vastly improve their health. She works with professional, busy people who want to focus on their health, but might not have all the time in the world. And I love Jenn's approach to health and how when I hang out with her, I see her taking her supplements and her tinctures. She's walking the walk and she knows her stuff. So welcome, Jenn.
Hi, I'm so excited we're finally doing this.
Yes, for sure. So before we dive in, the topic we're going to ask today is the questions, the tests that you have not been running for your thyroid and that you could run to get much better data. We're going to dive into estrogen dominance, progesterone, and some of these topics that a lot of us as women have questions about, but we're not getting the clear answer, the clear testing, or the clear pictures. But before we dive into that topic, will you share with us your background and what got you to doing what you do now?
Yeah, I would love to, because I think it's so important for us to share more of what we're experiencing in our stories to help other people and help elevate everybody in being able to take charge of their health. And as it's very common in the functional, holistic, integrative health space, I got into doing this work because of my own health journey. I have always kind of been interested in health from a sense. I mean, I went to college and I studied kinesiology, which is the study of the body, fitness, nutrition, and health, and started my career in the fitness industry, armed with all my education, thinking that I knew everything that there was to know about health, right? Obviously, I went to college and got a degree in it. And shortly after that, I started to encounter just really unusual health issues and different types of various symptoms. I also, like in working in the fitness industry, was struggling to maintain my weight, even though I was dieting and exercising, as we're told is the solution for everything. And then I was diagnosed with skin cancer. And that was really when I started to question what health really meant and what were the pieces of the puzzle that I was missing, because every time I went to the doctor, I was told that I was the picture for perfect health. They wished that all of their patients were like me. And again, I was doing all the quote unquote right things, eating healthy and exercising, yet in my mid-20s diagnosed with skin cancer for no apparent reason, no family history, nobody could explain it to me. And luckily at that time, one of my friends and kind of mentors introduced me to Reed Davis, which I know you've had on the podcast here, who's the founder of Functional Diagnostic Nutrition, and heard him speak for the first time. And I was the light bulb went off. Here's all the information that I think that I have been missing. He was talking about the physiology of the body and how our adrenals interact with our detox system and our digestive system. So really enlightening the bigger picture around hormones, immune, digestion, detoxification, nervous and energy systems. And I took physiology and biology and human anatomy in college, and nobody was talking about it in the way that he was talking about it. So I immediately took action, enrolled in the FDN course. And as part of that experience, you do you do functional lab testing on yourself, right? So we're really used to like going to the doctor, getting blood testing done, which is the typical approach, which can give us some information, but is not the only way to collect information. And so doing some functional lab testing, which typically is like saliva, urine, stool based, I found that my hormones were a disaster. I had bacteria overgrowth going on in my gut and my intestinal system. And I had really high oxidative stress, which is a key marker for things like cellular DNA damage, which can increase your risk for things like cancer. And I had a very congested liver, and our liver is in charge of moving toxins out of the body. And so since it wasn't able to do that job really well, I had toxins that were trapped in the body. So it was like all these pieces came together that made the perfect sense, like the perfect storm of how cancer probably got cultivated in my system. And so I was able to utilize that information and that data to guide recommendations and changes for my lifestyle, like the way that I was eating and sleeping and dealing with stress and the supplements that I was taking. And here I am with you today, over 15 years skin cancer free, right? And was able to take back control of my own health. And I'll be honest, like it hasn't been like an easy road and all rainbows and butterflies the whole time. I also encountered another, what I call health hurdle later on. We discovered a couple years later that we had mold in our house, and that toxic mold in our home really weighed on my body and burdened it in a way that resulted in things like estrogen dominance and Hashimoto's, a thyroid autoimmune condition. As well as other like detoxification and energy system issues, which again, doing some of the functional lab testing, being able to collect information to understand what's going on in my body, I was able to take strategic action again to clear those things out of my body, rebalance my hormones, and I was able to actually put my autoimmune condition in remission within 6 months and stay there. So I hope by sharing this story, one, it's an inspiration to everybody that it is possible to reclaim your health. And what really helps with that is collecting information and being able to utilize that information to see the full picture and be able to take personalized, targeted, strategic action for what your body specifically needs to overcome those things.
Absolutely. I loved that. You're right. Personalized, targeted, strategic action. Talk about a powerful phrase right there. Thank you for sharing your story. It's all of our health stories that usually lead us into this pathway of craving the knowledge and then wanting to, once we realize how to put the body into a healing state, we crave helping others with that knowledge. And so I love that this system has helped you so much. I think it's so powerful to understand the tools that exist for us to understand what is the actual state of being in our body, and then what are the roadblocks to optimal health that we need to go in there and address. Because if we don't know them, we can't address them. And so today for our topic on thyroid, I'd love for you to give us, that 101 picture at first, because not everyone listening has like the PhD level understanding of thyroid. I think most of us don't. So will you kind of dive into it and some of the tests that we need to be taking to actually understand what's happening? Because I find a lot of times my friends at least will say, yep, I went to the doctor, they gave me this drug, and we just keep increasing the drug. And I'm like, guys, this is not the right approach, because you'll take the drug forever and you'll increase it forever, and you might still have the same symptoms. So let's look at other ways to approach this.
Exactly. And, the body adapts, and certain medications eventually become less effective over time. And Reed might have said this when you had him on the podcast. I've heard him say it so many times, is like, your body doesn't have like an Ambien deficiency, right? Or an ibuprofen deficiency. Like that's not what's happening. And we want to take a step back and whatever's happening with the body and get curious and go, well, why is this happening? Why are my hormones out of balance? Like, what is happening here? Because the body has a natural desire to be in balance. And so when it's out of balance, we want to get curious about what is creating that type of environment, because then we can take that action to resume or restore balance naturally a lot of times, to get back in rhythm with our body. And I love that we're talking about thyroid today, because thyroid is one of the primary hormone imbalances that I see with the hundreds of clients that I've worked with over the years, and men and women. And the statistics about thyroid issues continue to grow. And again, you have to ask that question, like, is it my thyroid that's a problem, or is there something else that is actually going on? And so many people are told that their thyroid looks fine, even though they might have some of the classic thyroid symptoms. So the classic, we'll focus kind of on hypothyroidism, like a slow thyroid, which is what the majority of people are usually dealing with. And so some of those classic symptoms are things like weight gain, no matter what you're doing with diet and exercise, or hair loss, like if you feel like you're shedding hair more than usual, or you're losing the outer third portion of your eyebrows, or dry, brittle hair and nails, or feeling like you're cold all the time, or some of those, like I said, classic symptoms that just get dismissed. And your doctor will be like, just eat, cut your calories, exercise more, blah, blah, blah. Your thyroid looks fine. And so I want to take a step back to really help people understand this before we dive into the testing part of it, because if we understand how the thyroid works, it's going to make sense on why your thyroid test, why you're being told that your thyroid looks fine when it probably doesn't. You don't have enough of the information, essentially, right? So let's talk a little bit about anatomy and physiology of how the body works. So we have what we call the endocrine system in the body, which is the system of the body that kind of houses all of our glands and hormones. And in that system, we have the hypothalamus, which the hypothalamus sits in the brain. I like to refer to it as the CEO of the endocrine system. So it's kind of observing the marketplace of the body. And based on what's going on in the marketplace, just like a CEO would, it's then directing action for the company to take, right? The endocrine system. So the hypothalamus will then signal the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland also sits in the brain. And I like to refer to the pituitary gland as that is the president of operations. So the pituitary gland is then in charge of signaling other glands in the body, like the thyroid or your ovaries or the adrenal glands, about what they need to do, the operations that they need to take. So the pituitary is what releases what's called TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. So it is stimulating the thyroid to produce thyroid hormone. And this is what often gets tested typically when in our conventional system, when somebody is looking at your thyroid or testing thyroid, oftentimes they are just looking at TSH. So they're looking at a signal coming from the pituitary gland to the thyroid that actually tells us nothing about the output of the thyroid, really, right? It's one piece of a very big puzzle. So then once the thyroid gets signaled, it then releases T4 is one of the primary hormones. So thyroid hormone T4, which gets converted into thyroid hormone T3, what we call T3. And T3 is actually what the cells use. So we talk a lot about or people might know that the thyroid is a major player in regulating metabolism, the ability to lose weight, the ability to stay warm when it's cold outside, the ability to grow hair, right? And so this is why we'll see symptoms related to this when we're not getting enough T3. When T3 is low, we gain weight, we lose our hair, we're cold all the time. So there's a lot of steps in the process here that we basically need to be looking at to truly understand what's happening with a thyroid. Now, there's other players as well, too, in thyroid hormone. We look at things like reverse T3, which is when the body is pumping the brakes on utilizing T3 with the cells, because it's actually a safety mechanism. When the body is stressed, it wants to conserve energy and kind of slow things down a little bit. Or we have also T3 uptake, which is what helps to like get T3 into the cells. So obviously we could go on and list more pieces, but I'm going to focus on these major things. Sure. So what typically happens is you go to the doctor, they test your thyroid. They're only looking at TSH, which we already just said doesn't really show you the full picture. And if TSH looks fine, they're writing it off and saying your thyroid is great. Now, not only is TSH not showing us the bigger picture, but in general, what is also happening is that from a conventional Western perspective, the reference ranges for thyroid hormone are wide. So conventional ranges are like 0.5 up to 5, for example. What we want to look at is optimal ranges. And the optimal functional range for something like TSH is like 0.5 to 2. So quite a drastic difference, right?
Correct.
Those original conventional ranges were established a long time ago based on studies that were done that included sick people as well as healthy people. So they are actually not a reflection of what is healthy and optimal.
Sure.
What I would say is it's like looking at a spectrum. So where are you at on the spectrum? And from a conventional Western perspective, they're looking at a spectrum that is going to lead to a clinical diagnosis. So once that TSH gets out of conventional range, now they're going to clinically diagnose you with something like hypothyroidism. But that is part of the problem of our traditional system, is where it's not about prevention, it's sick care, right? So they're waiting until you are clinically deemed sick in order to take action versus looking at where are you on the spectrum and are you starting to move in this direction of a clinical diagnosis? So why don't we take some preventative action and actually get that TSH? If it's creeping out of over 2 into 3, why don't we start taking action to get it back into that optimal range? But to understand how to get it back into the optimal range, we also need to look at the full picture of what's going on. So when I work with people, we always like to look at a full thyroid panel, which is going to include TSH, total T4, free T4, total T3, free T3, reverse T3, T3 uptake, as well as the thyroid antibodies, TPO, and thyroglobulin. So that we can understand, we can see the connections of what's happening. So that hypothalamus, if we go back to the concept of the hypothalamus, the CEO of the body, what it's looking at is it's actually looking at TSH, at T3, right? Because T3 is what helps to regulate the metabolism. So when T3 is on the low side and the cells aren't getting what they need, then the hypothalamus is going to recognize something like that and go, oh, we need more T3. Let me signal the pituitary to tell the thyroid to create more T4 that gets converted into T3.
Right.
But if we have a problem, if we're not converting T4 well to T3, like that is a part of the solution right there, right? So it's not just about like, we can have like what happens a lot of times is people are then put on thyroid medication, which will typically be, let's just give you more T4. But if you're getting more T4, like levothyroxine, and you're not converting well, which a lot of that conversion happens in the liver tissue and the intestinal tissue, and you need specific nutrients in order for those functions to happen. If we're not converting well, that's not the solution to the problem.
Right.
We actually probably don't need more T4. We just need to work on the conversion factors.
Right.
Which is a lot of the work that I do with my clients is we go, okay, let's heal your gut. Let's work on cleaning up your detox pathways in the liver. And by doing that, then their T3 naturally comes up because they're converting better. They're getting their better absorbing nutrients. The tissues are healthier for conversion to happen, which then becomes this positive cycle back through TSH and all the other hormone balance. So I'll take a pause there because that was a lot of information, and let's make sure that we distill this down and simplify it if needed, or connect the dots for people.
No, that's wonderful. I think you covered it so beautifully, because a lot of times what I see with people is they have those subclinical thyroid conditions. When I send them to endocrinology, they're told, you know what, you have no problem, but you're close. So when you cross that line, then we start treatment. And so people come back to me and say, well, this is the data I have. It's incomplete data. And I'm not ready for the drug yet. And then I have gone into these endocrinology appointments sometimes and said, hey, here's this patient. I know you're going to be treating with medication, which, this is your patient. You should treat them how you wish. But could we have a conversation with them about diet? Like, is there any effect diet has on thyroid? And the doctor will say no. And I'll say, wow, all righty then. Really? You don't think diet has an impact here on this journey? Guys, come on. And so that's where I get frustrated. I'm like, not only will you not address the symptomatic subclinical thyroid woman, but you also won't even have a conversation around the inflammatory foods and how detrimental they are.
Exactly. And like, it's so fascinating to me because, like I said earlier, like, in order for T4 to be converted into T3, well, like, one of those essential nutrients is selenium. And we get selenium in foods, right? So but then we have to look at, well, even if you're eating the right foods, like Brazil nuts are really high in selenium, even if you're eating those, are you actually digesting them and absorbing them well? What does the state of your digestive system look like that's going to support the uptake of that nutrient? So 100% revolves around diet and from a nutrient capacity, but also when we think about, again, like taking that step back and getting curious about why is your thyroid or any other hormone out of balance in the first place? Sure. Where is that pressure, that burden coming from that is creating a balance that's leading to an imbalance? And diet plays a really big role in that, from an inflammatory perspective, from a nutrient perspective. So does sleep and exercise and mental emotional stress and toxins in our environment. It is a much bigger picture, basically.
Absolutely. And have you had patients or clients who have taken Armour or NP thyroid as like a temporary solution and then been able to come off it because they've done the work? Like, what has your experience been with that? Because I know in functional medicine, a lot of times people lean on that because at least it gets rid of those symptoms. Mm-hmm. Then we can start working on the work.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I was actually one of those people. So, as health professionals, we also have our own, like, doctors, health professionals that are on our team. And I have a really amazing naturopath who's a friend and a colleague of mine. And when I went through my mold issues and realized that I had a thyroid problem going on, that I had estrogen dominance, and all those things were like the storm that triggered things like hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's, I made an educated decision at that moment that I realized, there is a time and place for things like medications, that they can provide some acute relief, for example, and support for the body while we work on the bigger pieces of the puzzle to create a supportive lifestyle or environment. And so I was able to have a really great conversation with my naturopath at the time. And I love that she was, very gracious and open to having a conversation about what my options were. Yeah. And I went into that conversation saying that I don't want to be on thyroid medication forever. I recognize my body needs some support. So let's have a collaborative discussion about what are my options here. And she shared with me at the time that what she had noticed in her practice is people who received higher amounts of thyroid medication, it was harder to wean off of it, that the body would become sometimes like dependent. And so she said anything over, X number, like 64 mcgs, micrograms. She's like, that wasn't the exact number, but something of the effect. This was years ago, so I don't remember the exact number, but something to that effect. So she said, why don't we start you with the minimum and see how you feel? Because we know that you're going to work on the lifestyle to support the long-term goal. And so I took what did I take at the time? NP thyroid at the time, which is a natural thyroid hormone, which there's an advantage to taking natural thyroid medication, by the way, you guys, because you're not just getting only T4, only T3, you're getting like T1 and T2 and all the other hormones that support thyroid. And so that was my intention and my goal. And I achieved it. I was in remission within 6 months and weaning off of thyroid medication. And it's completely possible. So everybody's a little bit different. Some of my clients that I've worked with have been able to do the same thing. Sure. Some of them have been on thyroid medication for such a long period of time that their body is, in a way, like dependent upon it. It's not, I would even say, in those circumstances, I don't just write it off as impossible. I just think that their body, I think that the longer that they can cultivate a supportive lifestyle, that there's still a door of possibility to come off of that thyroid medication or to work it down to like a minimal amount, right? So there's a lot of, this is where we have to work with the individual and what their individual capacity, resiliency, biology is for those solutions.
Absolutely. I love that. And I thank you for diving into that, because a lot of people who I meet, I go, this is called subclinical thyroid. And there is something that would get you off of being so symptomatic. And then you have that energy and clarity. And I when I took NP thyroid, I always say it felt like putting glasses on inside of my brain, because I could see again, literally I could see clearly, but also that Shivani energy that I have of like, I'm a very motivated and focused and energetic, and I like to find big problems and then push the boulders up the mountain. All of that got much easier when post kids, like it had just felt like I couldn't push any boulders up the mountain without them coming crashing back on me. Right. So that's where I'm very passionate about. Understand your thyroid health, because your issue might not be, oh, I'm just aging. Oh, this is just how it is. Oh, I had kids and thus I am this way. How about let's look at how are your hormones doing and how are they supporting you to feel like your best self?
Definitely. What's really interesting about having kids is that, as it relates to thyroid, is that sometimes people have a thyroid problem going into pregnancy, and the body then, this is how the body is like just amazing, right? So the body, once you get pregnant, it does all these amazing miracle things internally. And obviously you have changes in hormones like estrogen and progesterone and all the other stuff. And sometimes coming out of pregnancy, that all resolves their thyroid problems, because there is an interplay of estrogen to progesterone with thyroid as well, too. The body is this complex network of systems that all work together in this beautiful dance. And then alternatively, sometimes people go into pregnancy without a thyroid problem and they come out of it with a thyroid problem, right? Because of the changes and shifts in their hormones, and maybe, just about like everything that happened through pregnancy, like maybe they developed gestational diabetes and like they didn't have the right diet or lifestyle to support what was happening. So, it's a very like the body. And again, the body has a desire to be in balance. That is its natural state. Yeah. So that natural state gets influenced by the things that we're doing externally. And it can also get influenced by things that are happening internally, like parasites, bacteria, yeast overgrowth, the liver being clogged, the accumulation of toxins. And we live in a very toxic world these days. So we really want to just have a wider lens that we're looking through to really assess what's happening with the body.
Absolutely. I love that. So I wanted to ask you two questions next. One, will you kind of go over those typical thyroid conditions that we see the most nowadays and what they mean? Because we did dive into hypothyroidism and those symptoms, but just, people hear Hashimoto's and Graves. So a brief intro on those. And then a little bit about estrogen dominance with progesterone, because a lot of times I see now women are diving into perimenopause and menopause. And we have all these conversations on hormones, and it can get quite confusing. I was recently trying to navigate it myself, and I did not appreciate the pushbacks I was getting on the traditional route. And so as I researched, I'm like, wow, we really need to educate on this topic, or women are really going to get pushed in directions that I might not appreciate.
Yeah. So I would say, like, there are a variety of different thyroid issues, right? Thyroid conditions. Like I said earlier, the most common one that we probably see is hypothyroidism. So a slowing of the thyroid. This is usually evaluated by a really high TSH in combination with low T3. Typically is what we're looking at. And as again, like this can also, a lot of doctors will distinguish this just by looking at TSH when it gets over the conventional range. But we just talked about the interplay of all the hormones. We want to look at all the pieces. We can also have the alternative to that is hyperthyroidism. So hyper, right, it's hyperactive for various different reasons. So this is when you're going to have like maybe lower TSH and you've got higher T3 and different things that are going on. Those are the two most common ones. And then I would say, from an autoimmune perspective, the ones that we hear the most about are going to be Hashimoto's, which you can have Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, right? So usually related to that low thyroid perspective. In addition to having antibodies, the body is attacking thyroid tissue. And then the other one that's very common is Graves' disease. And the Graves' disease can be correlated a lot with hyperthyroidism, the alternative to that. So we could talk forever, but I think those are the basic ones that we want to be looking at essentially. And again, always asking that question, well, what is interacting with the thyroid? What is happening to create these conditions in the body?
Right. Like, what is that root cause?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing is that you guys, we throw around the word root cause. It's kind of a popular term right now. But if you think about the idea that the body is a complex network of systems that are all interacting with each other, there are going to be possible multiple root causes, or there is no one single root cause. Because, I think about, if we think about something like what we see a lot of times with correlating with thyroid, like a hypothyroidism, a sluggish thyroid, we'll also see cortisol dysregulation. Mm. And so when the body is trying to adapt with cortisol dysregulation, the thyroid can kick into support. And alternatively, when the thyroid is sluggish, the adrenals and cortisol can kick into support. And so in that scenario, it's kind of that old saying of like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Right. We're never really going to know, but we know that both things are happening. And so we actually need to support both areas, right? Yeah. Or if we think about, as I talked about, like the intestinal tissue and the liver tissue are critical for thyroid hormone conversion and nutrient absorption. Are we ever going to know like which one of those things came first? No. They're probably both happening at the same time, as they always are, as I see in my practice. And so is there really truly a root cause? I mean, we encounter so many variables within our day all the time. It's actually kind of impossible to isolate a very specific root cause, I think.
You know what's so funny? Now that you said that, I think our desire to find a root cause is our pre-programming of our desire to walk into the doctor's office, be given one answer with one clear solution to the problem. So now that you're saying it, I'm like, yeah, you're kind of right. Like I do want to be told it's X, treat with Y. It's not like we want to hear, hey, by the way, let's go do some more digging. Let's understand why multiple systems aren't working. It's almost like if you have a company and you have like 10 departments, no one wants to admit that there's systemic issues, right? You want to say, oh, it's just front desk. It's all front desk's problem. You would never want to say front desk. And I've seen this so many times. Front desk all the way through to management, through to billing, through to insurance, and all the way back around. And that's why that system has a problem.
Right. And this is also why, so a lot of the people that come through my health practice is that they've come to me and they're like, I've tried a diet, like I've tried an autoimmune paleo diet, or I've done paleo or Whole30. And they're like, I wasn't getting the results that I see everybody else getting, and my thyroid's not improving. And they've tried diet and exercise things, or they've tried certain supplements, which again are pieces of the puzzle, but it's not the whole puzzle. So I always like to say, like when a diet, and I hate the word diet because it sounds like it's restrictive, but when a healthy way of eating, we'll say it that way, when a healthy way of eating is not working and producing the results that you want it to, that's just another clue that we need to actually dig a little bit deeper and look underneath the hood and go, what is rendering this diet ineffective for you, this way of eating? So when I work with people like that have Hashimoto's, for example, yes, 100% an autoimmune paleo diet is going to be therapeutic and supportive in healing and reversing that Hashimoto's. But that diet is only going to be effective if they are actually getting really good, great sleep at nighttime for the body to utilize all of the nutrients that it's getting from food to restore and repair the cells and do the things that need to be happening in the body. And if they are working out, intensely and breaking down the body when they're trying to heal at the same time, that's going to work against, those dietary and sleep efforts. So we have to align exercise intensity with the healing path that you want to be on. Or if you're getting bombarded with toxins, or you've got like in your environment, or a clogged liver and detoxification system, your diet and your exercise and your sleep efforts are only going to get you so far. So we really have to look at all the pillars of lifestyle and health to create a full service solution that's going to get to the end result that you want to get to, right? So I feel the frustrations of people. Like I remember those things myself. I mean, even when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, I immediately went on an AIP diet. I doubled down on my sleep efforts. I started really paying more attention to toxins in my environment, just trying to lessen the load on my body. But being such a fitness enthusiast my entire life, I was still going to the gym and doing like Olympic style lifting. I would like run. Here's what I would do is I would run to the gym, which is a mile. I would lift super heavy and then I would run home. Like think about the beat down that I was giving my body every time I worked out. And so here I am in this depleted state because we had toxic mold in our house. My thyroid is obviously suboptimal and I'm quote unquote doing all the right things, but still grinding my body into the ground, tearing down muscle and tissue and asking it to rebuild when it didn't actually have the resources to rebuild. And those resources needed to be conserved for other healing aspects to reverse Hashimoto's. So I had a little come to Jesus moment with myself.
Yes.
To that was part of my identity, being super into fitness. And I had to have some grace and say, okay, I'm going to commit to just 30 days. I'm going to start with 30 days of only yoga and walking.
Wow.
And it was really hard, right? Type A perfectionist personality. I wanted to be that high achiever working out of the gym, but that I had to do that for my body. And when I did that, I started to make bigger leaps and bounds in feeling better and losing weight and improving my thyroid numbers.
Wow. It's a big deal. Mm-hmm. What a beautiful way of sharing it and a powerful reminder, because so many of us who are obsessed, I'm obsessed with the gym. Like I require the gym for my mental health and my physical health and all the energy I build, and I clear my mind in the gym. Like that prescription, I totally get it, is very hard. But if we're not going to take those moments with our health and fully understand our panels and our testing, and then do what the body needs to do to heal for that season, then we're not setting ourselves up for success.
Yeah.
So thank you. It's such a beautiful reminder of even we as the practitioners have to take the medicine and do the work.
Yes. And I want to tie it in a little piece of the testing based on what you just said right there is that, one of the tests that I like to do is the Dutch test. And the Dutch test is a urine test that looks at your hormones. So like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. It actually gives you more hormonal insights than a typical blood test, but it also looks at your cortisol levels. So how much cortisol you're producing and then how you're utilizing that. And when we look at cortisol, we can start to see if you're in what's called like a catabolic state. So when the body is depleted, overwhelmed with inflammation and stress, we can see that reflected in cortisol. And then, and being in a catabolic state means that the body is breaking down muscle tissue, or you're not able to generate muscle tissue. And so that can be like, I see that a lot in my clients where they're, again, like they're trying to eat healthy and they're exercising, but they're not getting the results. They're not gaining, losing weight. They're not putting on muscle mass like they want to. And it's because they've got this cortisol dysregulation going on that often is related to thyroid. But this becomes the information and the motivation that we need sometimes to make those changes. So a lot of times when my clients work with me, we dial back their exercise intensity. Like I just said, where we focus on more restorative types of exercise, whether that's yoga, walking. They can still lift weights, but it's like not going at 1 rep maxes, right? Or even 5 rep maxes. It is lower weights. Only working at like on an exertion scale of 1 to 10, maybe working at a 5 or a 6. So you're feeling your workout, breaking a little bit of a sweat, but not grinding your body into the ground so that you can still move, but also be able to heal and recover. And then once we restore balance to the body and the hormones, then they can resume their higher intensity exercise routines, their favorite type of stuff, which I have done as well too. And they're able to tolerate, their body has the resiliency, the strength to tolerate it at that point in time.
Makes sense. Makes absolute sense. You know what, that resonates because certain seasons of our lives or businesses might feel like we are grinding in our own business. And so what I'm finding is I can't do both. You can't grind yourself into a pulp in your business while also doing it at the gym and then assume the body can regenerate everything.
Exactly.
Yeah. So managing that whole pie is so important. One last question I have for you as we start to wrap up, because I feel like we could talk about this topic for hours. When it comes to estrogen dominance, you mentioned the Dutch test, and I know that, I've done the Dutch test. It showed up estrogen dominant. I have 0 progesterone. It said postmenopausal progesterone. And when I posted my results, because I love talking about all this stuff online, some friends of mine messaged me back and said, same here, same here. And I was like, oh gosh, okay, interesting data point. It's not just me. So we talked about this briefly, you and I, just by taking birth control for some period of our life can impact this number. So will you dive into that a little bit and give some guidance on it?
Yeah. And I love that this is like, this is part of the methodology that Reed Davis taught me, is that we, don't treat the test results, you treat the person. So we're always looking for correlations between, we have to recognize that tests are valuable. They can provide us clues and information. And at the same time, a test is only a snapshot in time. So the levels in the body can change all the time. So when you're doing a test, you're looking for, do the outcomes and the results of the test actually correlate back to the person's symptoms and experience, which is, you're combining the information to then make this educated, form an impression about what's happening with somebody. And I'm similar, and we were talking about this earlier. I was on birth control for 17 years, you guys. Had painful irregular periods as a teenager. And of course, that was the solution that was given. And I was told that it was okay to take it forever. And, then I kind of abused it in a way. Like I would just skip the placebo pill, and like I went 5 years without a period. And if you guys want to learn more about the impacts that hormonal birth control has on the body and what's really happening, I would highly recommend that you read Dr. Jolene Brighton's book, Beyond the Pill. She explains this in great detail. But in summary, what hormonal birth control does is it interferes with the communication of the brain, the pituitary gland, and the ovaries. And so like it kind of makes our ovaries in a way like go dormant, essentially. So I've been off of birth control for 6 or 7 years at this point in time. And on the Dutch test, my progesterone still comes back postmenopausal, but I don't feel that way. So when we have postmenopausal ranges of progesterone, that typically would be an indicator that we're not ovulating anymore. So as women move through menopause, for example, and you're looking at progesterone, and when progesterone is at a low point, you're not ovulating, you're not getting a period anymore. And that's what the typical path is. But that's not the case for me. I get all the signs and symptoms of ovulation: the cervical fluid, the bump in libido, the temperature rising. And so I know that I am ovulating, even though my progesterone looks like it's in the tank, right?
Yeah.
So we want to always correlate it back with the person. And I would say that the other thing I want to mention here, a couple more things, is that to me, in my experience, the Dutch test has been one of the best tests that I've ever seen pick up on estrogen dominance. And estrogen dominance, the definition of that, is basically having actual high levels of estrogen, so outside of range estrogen. But it could also mean that you have normal levels of estrogen, but the ratio of estrogen to progesterone or estrogen to testosterone is off. So if you've got low progesterone and low testosterone and normal estrogen, that can also create a scenario of estrogen dominance. And this is not picked up very well on blood test in my experience. When we're doing a blood test, it's looking at bound hormone. So bound hormone means it's like the byproduct. It's hormone that's already been used, that's now in the bloodstream. It's not available for cellular use, for example. Versus on a Dutch test, we're looking at available active hormone. So we can actually see what's available. And we can see on the Dutch test, we can see 3 different estrogens, which on a blood test, you typically will see 2, maybe sometimes only 1. So we get a bigger window, again, of what's happening in the body. But we also get to look at the estrogen metabolism pathways, which gives us some insights into liver function, like how is estrogen being metabolized through the liver, because the liver helps to get rid of excess estrogen. And also, are there any risks of like estrogen metabolism can show us risk factors for things like breast cancer, ovarian cancer, that type of stuff as well, too. So it is a great data collection test to be able to see a broader perspective of what is happening. And we have, I think our generation, Shivani, there's a lot of birth control usage with our generation. I think about my mom's generation. They were that older generation, like my mom would have been like 67-ish around now. Mm-hmm. They used it for maybe short periods of time, but our generation was like long extended periods of time. And what I see that's really interesting happening now is the younger generation of women are kind of catching on to the fact that birth control is not great for the body. And I'm seeing more women come in and say, my doctor wants to put me on birth control to regulate my hormones, but that doesn't feel right. Like I want to figure out how to do this naturally. And I think that is fantastic because I like to share my story because I'm in after 17 years of usage, I'm kind of still unwinding and untangling the implications of that, So.
Yeah. And it's such a powerful story of we're told things we can take that have no punishment and we believe. And then oftentimes there is this punishment that we didn't recognize, because we were told something's innocuous. And I think that happens often. I'm a big proponent of all the solutions that exist, but I really hate it if I do something that has punishments that I couldn't have understood. That happened to me as a kid. I took chronic antibiotics through high school. Every time I got a cold, doctor said, here's antibiotics. And amoxicillin wasn't doing it. So it was Augmentin. So it was just like, here you go, here you go, here you go. By the time I reached college, I was like, why don't I have an immune system that works? Like, why do I have no defense system in place? And then I learned, chronic antibiotic use could be bad for you. It might destroy the gut. might be that we need to repopulate the gut. And that's when I discovered Ayurveda. So I just needed a solution that would actually do something for me.
Yeah. I mean, my husband had a similar history. He is at 46, he's very reactive to beef. So he gets very inflamed if he eats any beef or cow's milk products, which, I mean, think about, that's like a food staple in a lot of people's diets, right? And it took us a little bit to figure out that this was part of his one of his problems and one of the solutions for him. Like, he was dieting and exercising, and we actually ran a Dutch test on him and discovered that he was estrogen dominance. I see a lot of estrogen dominance going on in men, by the way, especially men that are, putting on weight and struggling to lose weight. Topic we could dive deep into for another time, but
sure.
He changed his diet, got a handle on his estrogen dominance, and still was hanging on to some weight. And then we discovered that he was sensitive to beef, and come to find out, as a child, he was not able to be breastfed. So they gave him soy milk. And then he had reoccurring like colds and ear infections. And they wanted to give him antibiotics basically as a daily multivitamin.
Wow.
So this all impacts, the digestive system that probably created an intolerance to beef-like molecules, right? The molecular structure of beef in some kind of way, where even as much as he's avoided it and worked on healing his gut, like, he still has a sensitivity to it. Wow. Just altered the state of his body. So we do want to be really conscious. I hope all of our audience here that's listening that has little ones or is thinking about starting a family, you kind of take these things into consideration and explore what are some natural ways to bring that balance back into the body, because our kids want to be in balance. And, part of getting a cold as a little kid is part of strengthening an immune system. And there's ways to naturally modulate the symptoms to help them relieve some of the quote unquote suffering that they experience without the utilization of some of these prescriptions and things like that can have a longer term effect on the state of our health,
Absolutely. My doctor used to always say, here's this for your kids. And I just smile at her and she would know I'm not feeling anything. Thank you. Thanks for that offer. We've got our own solutions. I'll call you if we escalate. So I think we have a lot of options out there. And I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast today and really breaking down for us thyroid and all the different testing and all the different ways. You break things down so beautifully. I really absorbed it in a way that I've never gotten to before. So I really appreciate that.
So welcome. I hope it helped a lot of people that listen to this.
For sure. So will you share with us the ways that people can find you and connect with you? I know you have a 28-day cleanse on your website, which can help people who are suffering with these kinds of things. So please share where we can find you.
Yeah, my brand is the Holistic Health Boss. That's holistic with a W, like Whole Foods. So you can find me at my website, Holistic Health Boss. I'm also very active on Instagram, sharing information like this all of the time. So can find me there, Holistic Health Boss as well too. And just come connect with me. If you go to my website, you can jump on my newsletter. You'll find information about the cleanse challenge that I have. Then that 28-day cleanse challenge is really guiding you through a lot of the lifestyle concepts that we talked about today that create a supportive environment for the body to be back in balance. Things like diet and sleep and exercise and toxin elimination. And so that can be a great structure to help you move through some of those concepts and then connect with me more about further support if you need it. So thank you, Shivani, for having me on here. I'm so grateful to just be able to share this information and experience to help other people find the missing pieces of their health puzzle so they can fix whatever's going on and get back to feeling like themselves again.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for patients with pain and inflammation. www.fusionaryformulas.com. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.